He pauses at the door with a flicker of hesitation as his hand tightens around a few bronze coins, warm from his palm. Behind him, the alley breathes, distant laughter and the clatter of wheels fading into the night. He knocks once, the door opens, and there he is, youthful, oiled, wearing nothing but a thin cloth and a gaze practiced to wound. Not a word is exchanged. He tilts his head, smiles like he's done this 100 times, and maybe he has. They don't need names, the currency is enough. Inside, a bed waits, low and clean. This is a service, registered, watched, and approved. So, are you curious about what really went on behind the curtain? Join us as we explore the history of male brothels of the Roman Empire. Stick around to find out who the coins were for, what they bought, and why silence was part of the price. Whispers beneath the law. Before we throw open the velvet curtain, we need to understand just how aboveboard this world really was. Male prostitution in ancient Rome wasn't some dirty secret tucked in back alleys. It was visible, taxed, and, in many ways, protected. Legally, a male citizen could sell his body, but it would cost him his status and reputation. Once branded a male concubine, even a freedman could lose legal credibility. And for enslaved boys, consent wasn't even part of the question. They weren't people under law, they were property. If their master wanted them in a brothel, that's where they went. No appeal, no exit. The laws that taxed and regulated this trade were startling enough. But even more revealing were the men who entered those doors and the unexpected places where these brothels operated. Inside the walls. The brothels were often located on busy, bustling streets, close to markets, baths, and taverns. Near the Suburra district, infamous for its vice and noise, male brothels thrived in plain sight amid the city's chaos. The buildings were modest, stone or brick structures with heavy wooden doors, sometimes bearing discreet signs or symbols only certain clients would recognize. Inside, the rooms were small and dim, lit by flickering oil lamps. Stone or wooden benches lined the walls, offering little comfort but plenty of opportunity. Many brothels had a small courtyard or hidden garden tucked behind thick walls, a quiet place for whispered negotiations or hushed warnings before the night's transactions began. Erotic mosaics and frescoes adorned the walls, depicting gods of love and desire like Priapus, Eros, and Aphrodite. These images promised pleasure and escape, even if the reality was harsh. But what kept these places running? Who owned them? Who trained the boys? How did they recruit them, hide them, rotate them? The players behind the curtain. To understand how these brothels functioned, we need to meet the people who made them tick. At the top was the leno, the manager, often a freedman or low-status citizen who ran the day-to-day operations. His job was brutal and businesslike, ensuring clients were satisfied and debts collected. The workers themselves ranged widely in age and status. Some were slaves, bought and sold like any other property. Others were freedmen or even free-born youths who entered the trade for survival or profit. Recruitment methods varied. Some were kidnapped, others sold by impoverished families, and some coerced by circumstance. The concubines and prostitutes often bore tattoos or brands marking them as property. Their lives were harsh, their futures uncertain. Despite this, many learned to navigate the perilous social currents inside the brothel, sometimes gaining favor with wealthier patrons or brothel owners. Interestingly, some workers were trained performers too, musicians, dancers, and conversationalists, to lure and entertain clients before the transaction. Pleasure wasn't only physical, it was a spectacle, a full experience. And what of the clientele? Senators came cloaked in silence, generals in disguise, merchants flush with coin and appetite. Even young aristocrats, still learning the ropes of Roman power, ventured in, curious, emboldened, or simply entitled. They came for pleasure, for dominance, for something they couldn't name in public. So, how did they operate? The business of flesh and desire. The process was surprisingly structured, almost bureaucratic, blending commerce with performance. The brothels often had separate rooms or courtyards where potential buyers could view and select workers. Displays were common. Young men stood or lounged, presenting their bodies, while some might perform songs or dances to entice. The Leno oversaw the entire process, ensuring the selection was orderly and transactions were swift. Payments were made up front, usually in coins stamped with the emperor's image, a reminder that this commerce was state-regulated and taxed. Prices varied widely depending on the youth's age, appearance, and skills. Some could command higher fees for their looks or talents, while others were sold cheaply. Once the deal was struck, the client and worker would retreat to a private chamber, often simple but functional, designed to keep the transaction discreet yet efficient. If the system ran so openly, did Roman society truly accept or just pretend not to see? Let's take a closer look. Praise, scorn, and the complex legacy of male brothels. These institutions were woven deeply into the fabric of daily life, but opinions on them were far from unanimous. Certain emperors, like Nero, were known to indulge openly in such establishments, even sponsoring lavish parties that blurred lines between power, pleasure, and politics. For them, brothels were part of the spectacle of empire, extensions of control and excess. Philosophers like Seneca scorned brothels as emblems of moral rot, warning that indulgence eroded discipline and civic duty. Cicero linked sexual commerce to the collapse of virtue, using it as rhetorical shorthand for a society in decline. Even the Stoics, champions of self-control, viewed male brothels as proof of Rome's surrender to pleasure over reason. Satirists like Juvenal wielded irony like a blade, exposing elite hypocrisy. Senators who decried debauchery by day but slipped into brothels by night. And still, despite all the outrage, the brothels remained. So what brought their fall? And how did the empire try to forget? The answer lies ahead. Decline and erasure. As centuries passed, the once visible world of male brothels began to retreat into the shadows. The Roman Empire's moral compass shifted, driven by waves of political reform and the rising dominance of Christianity. What had once been taxed and tolerated was now branded sinful. By the 4th century, emperors like Constantine and Theodosius began issuing edicts targeting same-sex relations and closing known houses of male prostitution. Public brothels, once clustered near busy forums or bathhouses, were pushed to the outskirts or shuttered entirely. Writers like Suetonius and Petronius, who once alluded to these spaces, vanished from the canon or were censored outright. The crackdown wasn't just legal, it was cultural. Rome rewrote itself. Male sex work, once an open secret, became unspeakable. But silence isn't erasure. Underground, networks adapted, hidden from the law, but alive in practice. Still, the empire had made its decision. Male brothels no longer belonged to public Rome. What remains of their story now? What legacy did these hidden corners of the empire leave behind? Let's dive into it. The shadow left behind. Though male brothels vanished from the public eye, their imprint lingered long after Rome's empire crumbled. These institutions shaped ancient society's complex attitudes towards sexuality, power, and commerce in ways that ripple through history. They challenged rigid social norms and blurred the lines between public and private, sacred and profane. Roman brothels left behind more than just faded ruins and forgotten laws. They influenced art, literature, and legal traditions that survived through medieval and modern times. The very concepts of regulated sex work and the commodification of bodies trace roots back to these ancient practices. Their existence forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power dynamics, exploitation, and the resilience of marginalized communities. So here's the question: if history tried to silence them, what else has it erased? If you liked this journey through Rome's underbelly, like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the shadows of ancient history.